to the BizBlend podcast. Now, actually, before having this conversation, I was really thinking, and I have kind of, have been struggling with this, that for me, sometimes, life feels like a constant balancing act. When I look at some of, the stuff from the aviation world, the world of aviation, I kind of have these parallels, like staying sharp under pressure, then like in cockpit of an F-16, like a single decision which can actually change the outcome of a mission. And when we connect that to business, one misstep can alter the course of a company, listeners. But just try to imagine this. What happens when the precision of tactical aviation collides with the messy, unpredictable world of entrepreneurship? Well, listeners, today we are joined by Major Anthony A.B. Bourke. He is a decorated F 16 fighter pilot who carried lessons from thousands of hours in the skies into the boardroom. From flying homeland defense missions over New York City after 9/11 to scaling companies into the tens of millions to building a global training powerhouse. Anthony AB has lived at the intersection of performance and purpose. So, listeners, this conversation is more about just than strategy. It is about discipline, resilience, and also finding ways to lead with clarity, whether you are in the air or in your office, in the chamber. So, Anthony, welcome to the show. And
Sana, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. I understand you're in beautiful Bangalore, India. I've had the pleasure of visiting your beautiful city. It is truly beautiful and working with a company there. So I have great admiration for your country and your city. And we also have in the U.S. Air Force very great admiration for the Indian Air Force. We've learned a lot from them, particularly as it relates
oh,
to how they deploy their MiG-29, which is a Soviet-made fighter, but that the
yeah.
Indians have really figured out how to deploy at a very high level. So, kudos to you and kudos to the Indian Air Force because they're really superstars.
Oh wow! I really, really, I thank you so much, Anthony. That really means a lot. And I think when I look at Air Force, although I don't have the knowledge around the technicalities in there, but in popular culture, when we look at some of the movies in there, uh, or Top Gun and stuff like that, I think that really, really gives those. Feelings, those emotions of how, although it looks glamorous, but then deep down, it needs a lot of commitment, discipline, resilience, and the skill of making the most difficult decisions within just split of seconds. And that is something I think that is very, very difficult, but it is possible to hone. So yeah.
It is. In fact, we have a expression that we use in the military, and that is that fighter pilots are made, not born. And I believe this also
Mm.
applies to entrepreneurs or business people. Great business leaders are made, not born. And I say that because, certainly there are fighter pilots with some God-given abilities. They're smart, they're physically
Yeah.
gifted, they can see things in 3 dimensions, they can anticipate what's coming faster than others. But really, the way we get there, the way we get to a place where we're executing at truly a high level is because of training, because we train again and again and again. So when there is an actual conflict, it's second nature and we know how to react. And I think the same is true for business leaders that invest in um, training, invest in thought leadership, invest in psychology and people relations. Uh, they tend to be the ones who really thrive in the end.
That is so well said. So well said, Anthony. And I 100% agree with that. Uh, And um, this brings me to, um, like business, it isn't a life or death in the same way, yet I think the stakes, they can feel just as high for entrepreneurs, who risk everything into it. And also on the flip side, did you find any lessons from aviation that didn't translate well to business, like where uncertainty, human emotions play a bigger role?
So you made a point and asked a question. I want to support your point. You
Mhm.
know, people tell me all the time, "Well, of course you train as a fighter pilot, and of course you have we have a very important um, I'm going to call it a core belief in this idea of debrief that
Mhm.
no matter how hard we train, no matter how hard we work, no matter how good we are, no fighter pilot's ever flown the perfect mission. And I think it's
Mhm.
fair to say that no one in business ever is going to have the perfect day, the perfect week, the perfect month, the perfect customer interaction or event. And that's why when fighter pilots are done executing our missions, we always call timeout and hold a debrief so we can learn from both the mistakes and the victories of today's mission, and we can continue to improve as individuals, certainly as a team, and maybe even more importantly, so that as leaders, we can call time out from time to time. Not all the time, but at the
Yeah.
appropriate time uh, close the door, take our name tags off our chest, take our rank off our shoulders, create a safe environment, and get our people, get our customers to give us the honest, real time feedback we need to keep us ahead of the threat, certainly ahead of the competition, and
Mhm.
ahead of the inevitable change that will continue to come our way. And, you know, you mentioned to me that, well, of course you do this because your life depends on, you know, acting in the right way, executing at a high level, making good decisions. We say, yes, we bet our lives on the decisions and actions we make, and we debrief to make sure we get better every day. It's my personal belief that business leaders bet their way of life on the decisions and actions that they make every day. And I can tell you, I mean, I think we've all been around long enough to recognize that, you know, businesses go away, divisions get closed, people have to sell their house, people have to pull their kids out of school, people have to move to somewhere else. If they continue to repeat, mistakes or fail, I think a better way to say it is fail to improve, to commit to this culture of continuous improvement. So, I think, that was your first point. You asked a second question, and I'm not sure I completely understood it.
Yeah. So, uh, I'm just curious to know, Anthony, like, are there any lessons that you found, like, from aviation that, may not have a direct correlation, or they may not make a parallel, in the business world?
Are there parts of business that don't have a direct correlation to tactical aviation?
Yeah, like a parallel in terms of, having parallel or then translate well to tactical aviation.
Good question. I
Mhm.
think a couple things that don't translate, as well is, first of all, the US military, and I think this applies to militaries around the world, don't have a particular profit motive. Um, we
Mm.
invest the time and money that it takes to make our people the best at what we do. And so we're not thinking in the same way about the bottom line as many companies. I think that's number one. Um,
Okay.
and that's probably the biggest one and one that people can use as an excuse, maybe not to, invest in training and not to develop systems for their people to help them execute at a higher level. I don't think personally that they're valid. I think if you do have a profit motive in your business, uh, you
Mhm.
know, training is an area where you should put a great deal of investment,
Absolutely.
uh, not just in training your people, but building a culture to get your team aligned and flying in formation so that they're executing at a high level. What I see so often in business is a bunch of really bright individuals all kind of doing their own thing, and not really flying in formation. And so, this is where I think the military model, can be very, very helpful.
I I think you really brought up a very crucial aspect in there. Because once again, if you circle back to the kind of quote that you mentioned, that fighter pilots are made, they are not born, and I think entrepreneurs as well. So I think someone who has the brightest of the mind, or they may have some God gifted skills in there. But I think if the attitude, the kind of, the skills in a holistic way which are required, the character in there is not in the right place, I don't think so there's much value in leveraging the mind or the skills, the God gifted skills in there, in that particular person. And I think to this, if I can connect, training is something that can actually help in building that character at an individual level, and then also laying the foundation of the most fundamental, aspect of any business, whether it's a startup or it's a small or medium or big enterprise, the culture in there. I think that kind of becomes a unique identity of, any organization.
Yeah, I agree. Sana, one other point I might make is
Hmm.
we have, a certain esprit de corps, uh, in the military, I think largely because the military is very mission driven.
Hmm.
Everybody knows who the enemy is or what the threat is, and
Exactly.
they know what their job is to overcome that threat. And in
Hmm.
business, I find that sometimes, leaders don't do a very good job of identifying the threat, of identifying a mission that the company can all rally behind. Or so often we see companies with, very flowery mission statements, um,
Yeah.
but but no one really pays much attention to them. No one really knows what they are. And this isn't all companies, but many that I've worked with. And so to the extent that business leaders can, you know, clearly state the mission so that the business isn't just profit driven, but it's purpose
Mhm.
driven. I think your people will run through walls if they know what their purpose is, if they know what their mission is, and they can all rally around the same mission.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's another brilliant point in there. I think this clearly um it clearly gives that essence of how the vision and the mission can be livable. You're living it, you're breathing it. That is something, before taking any decision, that is you are very clear, okay, this is exactly my mission, these are the values, and based on that, let's do the, let's go backwards and try to understand the problem, and then let's decide what to do here. And I would also go back to, you mentioned something about feedback culture. And you also kind of connected with the debriefing after a mission, which is actually, as you said, cornerstone of aviation culture. um how can leaders, especially when it comes to startups, Anthony, um, founders, because they are putting everything at stake for the company, for the business, sometimes it kind of clouds your ability to see the problems or the loopholes in there. And then it also blocks the acceptance, the willingness of accepting feedbacks, coming from your customers or maybe from your employees who are at the front line interacting with the customers. So how can leaders build that feedback culture without feeling it like blame or looking like a threat?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, Sana, obviously, startup culture is a unique part of the business world. And, I think many great startup leaders Um, they've got a company that's kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. So,
Mm,
we know what we want to do. We're not exactly sure how to get there. Let's try stuff, try stuff, try stuff. This idea of let's fail faster, but let's keep moving forward. And sometimes those cultures are very loose, they're very fast. Uh, and I think that's all wonderful and really essential to running an effective startup. At the same time, we can fail faster if we will develop some sort of, and I'm going to use the word formalized feedback culture, some sort, I call it a feedback loop of regular briefing and debriefing, where a leader on a regular basis briefs the team uh, on what the objectives are, what the
mm,
threats are, what assets we have to overcome those threats, and then assigns people roles and responsibility to overcome those threats, uh, and accomplish their objectives. Uh, and then finally, maybe once a week talks about possible contingencies. We've got a plan. We're moving forward. We know some things might not go right. Let's talk about those so that when they happen, if they happen, we can react to them and be effective and keep moving forward. And then maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks or once a month, call timeout, and of course, these meetings are built into the company's schedule. They're built into the company's cadence.
mm.
But every Friday at 4 p.m., we get back together and we hold a debrief, and it only lasts 30 minutes, but we go back and we say, "We said we were gonna accomplish A, B, and C this week. How are we doing? Are we winning? Are we losing? Are we neutral? What are we learning? What are we gonna do better or differently next week so we can continue to drive towards our end goal?" This culture can be very helpful to a fast-moving startup company.
Hmm, absolutely. Anthony, you also, this is something that, in your journey, like after the military, you rapidly became one of the top mortgage bankers in the Western US, which I don't know about, anyone else, but I think it's one of another highly stressful jobs or roles out in there. And it's not a small leap. Um, what mindset shifts were most critical in making that transition for you?
Huh. Well, this is it's a first of all, a great question, and,
Ah,
I'm gonna
okay.
explain something particularly to those of your listeners who are not, in the United States. In the United States Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, and Army, um, you can be a part-time fighter pilot. We call it a reserve fighter pilot. So, I spent 5 years flying on the active duty, and then I joined a reserve or quotations part-time F-16 squadron based in Fresno, California. Uh, and when you join a reserve F-16 squadron, you are certainly very warmly welcomed. But within about a week, your squadron commander takes you aside and says something to you like, "Hey, new guy or new gal, time to go find yourself a real job." And unlike most of my squadron
Oh
mates
my.
who
Okay.
yeah, yeah. It's a little bit of a shocker, because you're only gonna fly you
Yeah.
don't live on the base, you're not there 5 days a week. You generally in a fighter squadron, reserve fighter squadron, you fly about 2 times a week. In my case, that was Wednesday evening, and Friday afternoon. But, most of my squadron mates pursued careers as United Airline pilots or Delta Airline pilots or American Airline pilots. Uh, I chose a different path, which was to pursue my other life passion of starting and building at least what I thought were great businesses. So you're right. The first thing I did was helped open the regional bank, a regional bank for a company called Weyerhaeuser Mortgage in the Central Valley of California. And, I did have great success. I became the top producing mortgage banker in the Western US. And you asked,
Oh.
well, how do you make that transition and was it difficult? I think so the first the first way you make it is, for me at least, was, I'm gonna use the word fear because I had a wife and 3 young children, I had a mortgage, I had bills to pay, and, I got up very early every morning and went to work, and I worked late every night because I wanted to succeed, and in a large way, that was essentially applying the same principles I'd learned as a military officer and as a fighter pilot. Hard work, applying yourself, setting objectives, and then trying to accomplish them, not letting any roadblocks get in your way, work in business just like they do in the military. I also did something a little bit different than everybody else in the market at the time. At that time in the US market, and this is like 1992, there had been a huge wave of refinances. Interest rates had been falling for a number of years. And so all of the mortgage bankers in my market were basically they'd gotten a little complacent. In English, we say that they'd gotten fat, dumb, and happy. They basically sat in their office waiting for the phone to ring to have somebody call them up and say, "Hey, can you refinance my home loan?" And that paid them really well, and it was great. Uh,
Mhm.
since I didn't have those existing clients, I went out and, approached the, real estate agents in my community who were selling homes. And, these real estate agents were very happy to see me because most of their mortgage bankers had kind of forgotten about them. They didn't really need them anymore because their existing client base was refinancing. And so I was able to kinda capitalize on that, and as I did that, interest rates stopped falling. And s and so suddenly, people were still buying houses, but people were not doing refis. And so I just happened to put myself, in the right part of the market, won a number of very loyal realtors who were doing a lot of business, and that really launched my business and made me successful. So, in short, I kinda look at the market, I tried to find a niche where I could be successful, and then I put all my energy into it.
Yeah. I think it would be an understatement to say that, you were there at the right place at the right time. I think it was more about strategy and kind of, having that differentiator in terms of the choice that you made. Um, Other fighter pilots going for airline pilots or other roles, but you actually kind of followed your passion as well. And then you actually followed uh, and created a niche in there to build your business, a successful business. I think this also kind of, covers some of the basics there in growing a successful business. So, yeah, that's very, very interesting, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you.
Ah, great. Okay. And before we wrap up, I just want to bring in a nuance in here. Now, whenever, and this is more towards Anthony, more towards the holistic, wellness perspective, because let's just admit that, sometimes entrepreneurship can be a very, very isolated journey. It will definitely require, I don't know, 1,000% of your commitment, which involves your health, your emotional, your mental health, your family. Um, because you need that discipline, that consistency in there. As you mentioned about your how you wake up early in the morning, how you work late. Um, I mean, that kind of would be maybe during these times translated as something boring because you are doing the same thing every day, but you are practicing with such dedication and observation in there. That is exactly building a precision in there. So I would like to bring in a bit of the health aspect in there. Um, do you believe that, when an entrepreneur or founder trying to grow a successful business, um, sometimes, they would hesitate to take pauses or maybe take some rest in there just to have a clarity of their mind or just to focus on their health in there. Do you think that these aspects should be completely ignored, or maybe they should take a side pushback, or take a they should be in the background while an entrepreneur is completely into the business, or maybe a balance can be created in there?
Oh man, it's such an important point. Son, I'm a very active person. I ski quite a bit, almost 100 days a winter. I live in Park City, Utah, which is a mountain town. I ride a mountain bike
Oh,
often.
wow.
Um, I'm very physically active. But what I've learned from, really great athletes is that you must as hard as you train, whether you're a professional athlete or a weekend warrior, as hard as you train, you must build recovery. You must build rest so that your body can, heal and recover and you can be fresh for your next race, your next game, whatever it is. And I think the same exact thing is true for the mind. We must find some way as business leaders to recover. Um, and I ran a fairly large sales team, about 20 men and women for a long period of time. And these were young, hard charging people. We had a business at that time where we'd figured out how to sell our product through the Home Depot, and we grew very dramatically from essentially zero revenue to $70 million over the course of 3 years, which basically meant we got 40 feet of space in every Home Depot west of Minneapolis, Minnesota, which was 420 stores. And my people, including me, were working, 24/7. And I remember telling, them that as important as it was to work hard, I mandated that every Sunday they shut down, that they didn't look at their computers, uh, that they didn't look at their phones, that they spent time with their friends or their family and recharged their battery, both mentally and physically. And, I think it's absolutely critical as research in this area has continued to develop. I am trying to do a daily meditation practice. It really is a 5 to 15-minute commitment, and again, it's a way to clear your mind, to refresh your sanity. Uh,
Yeah.
Otherwise, between the cell phone, the computer, social media, 24-hour news, we are constantly inundated with inputs, and our mind, doesn't really get quiet. And I think,
Yeah.
a quiet mind is what will really help you focus, particularly as a leader, on solving the puzzles you need to solve to be effective. So, I'm a huge believer in recovery.
Wow. Super, super. And also, Anthony, if our listeners, they would like to connect with you, um, what would be the best way?
Well, there's a couple ways you can do that. One is just by visiting my website, which is MACH, the number two, consulting, consulting.com. Uh, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. My name is Anthony, Anthony, and last name is Bourke, B as in Bravo, Ourke. And I will show up there, and that's another great way to find me.
Superb. Listeners, I'll make sure to have all the details and all the links in the show notes for all of you. So just check out the show notes along with this episode on whichever platform you listen your podcast to. And Anthony, thank you. Thank you so much because you have really gave us you have really given us a new lens to see leadership through. I think one that brilliantly blends discipline, of course, with adaptability, precision, and then purpose, and then also bring in the important aspect of looking at your holistic health. So, thank you. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure, Sana. I hope I make it back to Bangalore and can meet you in person one day.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to that. And to all the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of BizBlend. May you carry a little of that fighter pilot mindset into your own ventures because sometimes the best way to grow business, let me articulate it, is to fly like a mission with heart, with clarity, and of course, with boldness. So, with that, This is your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.